Hey guys, here's part 2 of my programming series. Today we're talking about volume. Now some people will define volume as sets, others sets times reps. I'm going to get into the nuance later, but we can use set count as a basic indicator, but obviously not all sets are going to be equal. Again, I'll discuss that later. So recall from my last video the concept of training load, basically the stress from all of our training. We're sort of like Goldilocks when we're designing a program. We want to find a sweet spot where we're not doing too little, we're not doing too much. Ideally, we want to be able to handle more training load overall while still being able to recover so we can get more stimulus. Training load is going to depend on a lot of factors: sets, reps, intensity, exercise selection. I'll go over it when I get to my videos on each of these topics, but you're going to find they're more constrained when we're designing the program. So volume is really where we're going to be able to manipulate our training load. So when we're talking about volume, I like to use the analogy of a bucket of water. So water represents volume, and then the bucket itself is our work capacity, how much volume we can do. We can look at volume for the individual muscle basis. So our biceps, triceps, quads are all going to have a specific amount of volume that they can each do. But there's also some overlap between them all, or systemic fatigue. So you can think about the bucket for systemic fatigue and then each muscle on its own. Now, like I said, the size of the bucket represents our work capacity, how much volume we can do. Let's start by discussing the variables that are going to affect this. Now, first off, there's simply age. Older lifters are going to have smaller buckets, they can't do as much volume, and then vice versa with younger lifters. If you're injured, of course, your bucket will be smaller. So let's say you have a quad injury. Your quad's water bucket is going to be smaller. It can't handle as much volume. And of course, just like pretty much any variable, there's going to be some level of individual variation. Now, these are all factors that aren't really in our control, but there is ways we can control our work capacity and increase the size of our water bucket. The first is by progressively overloading in terms of volume instead of weight as people usually do. So we're basically exposing ourselves slowly to more and more volume so our body learns to handle it, our bucket gets bigger. The other is with cardio. So if you don't have a good level of cardiovascular fitness, your work capacity is going to suffer. It's important for recovery both between sets within a workout and also for recovery between workouts as well. You don't have to do a ton of cardio, but even just a couple short sessions of low-intensity steady-state cardio a week will keep up that aerobic baseline to let you recover and ensure you have a good work capacity. So that basically covers the size of our bucket, our work capacity. Now let's talk about the actual water, our volume. Now, whenever we do a set, we're going to pour a bit of water out of our bucket, but obviously not all sets are going to cost the same amount of water here. Some are more taxing than others. If you're a stronger lifter, you're going to be using more absolute load. That's going to take more out of you than a lighter weight. If you're talking about range of motion as well, a longer range of motion is going to work the muscle harder. You're taking more water out of your bucket. The amount of reps in a set matters as well. 10 reps is going to take more out of you than a single. Proximity to failure matters too. If you're going all the way to complete failure, that's obviously going to be a lot more taxing than a set that's very submaximal. Muscles we're working makes a difference as well, both in terms of systemic fatigue and for the muscle themselves, their own personal water buckets. Generally speaking, the larger a muscle is, the more systemic fatigue we're going to get from working it. And then certain muscles are able to handle volume better as well. Think about your calves or your abs. They're being used a lot whenever you're walking, moving around, so they can handle a lot of volume. And lastly, exercise selection is going to severely affect how fatiguing a certain set is. So compounds are going to be more taxing, taking more water because they're working a lot of muscle groups versus something like an isolation movement only working one muscle at a time. There are some other factors too, like the stability of the exercise, the axial loading, and the range of motion. There's a lot of different factors at play, but I think you guys get the basic point. Not all sets are going to be equal, so it's hard to easily quantify volume without the full context. And this is important because, like I said, we have a finite amount of volume or work we can do. We have a finite amount of water in our bucket. This means we have to allocate our volume or our water efficiently. So for a powerlifter, the bulk of our work is going to be spent on squat, bench, deadlift, and variations of these lifts. This is an extreme example, but I talked about how cardio can still be useful for powerlifters. But obviously, we're not going to do as much cardio as a marathon runner does. That's just going to take too much water out of our bucket. Want to prioritize on what our goals are, but that doesn't mean we want to give them all of our water. Why wouldn't we just do all of our volume on squat, bench, and deadlift? There's a couple of reasons for this. The first is the law of diminishing returns. As you do the same stimulus over and over again, you get less adaptation from it. We vary the stimulus, even if what we're doing isn't as specific to our goals, we're actually going to get better adaptations out of it because the stimulus is new. We call the individual muscle buckets as well. We can vary the lift a bit and use other muscles to do more volume overall. Instead of just doing all our bench press sets with our regular grip, we can throw in some close grip work as well, which is going to put more load on our triceps and let's do more volume overall. Even though we're working slightly different muscles here, the same movement pattern is being worked overall. We can improve on the neurological aspect of strength. Now, people talk about junk volume, and using it in my analogy, basically think about it as wasting water from our bucket. We could be using this water elsewhere and getting better results. Again, that really extreme example, think about doing as much cardio as a marathon runner. Obviously, that's overkill, even though cardio can be useful in general. Sometimes junk volume can even be the specific work you're trying to improve on. If I'm trying to get a better 1 rep max on my squat, there is such a thing as too much squat volume where I'm not recovering properly. I'm pouring so much water out of my bucket that it's not completely refilled by my next training session. So this water bucket analogy gives us a good framework for understanding volume, our work capacity, how much volume we can do, how taxing each given amount of volume is, and then how are we going to allocate that water efficiently to get us the best results. But what about actual numbers? Well, like I said before, there's going to be some individual variation for everybody, but a rough guideline is 8 to 15 sets per muscle or movement. That's going to encompass most people. And keep in mind all those factors I said that can affect how taxing the given set is. But I think a better way to adjust based on how we're doing is to use this simple infographic from Mike Tuchscherer that I mentioned in the last video. If we feel good and we're progressing good, that's perfect. That's where we want to be. If we feel good but we're progressing poorly, we're probably underdoing it a bit. If we feel bad but are progressing well, we may be overdoing it a bit and need to reduce training load to keep it more sustainable. And if we feel bad and are progressing badly, we're probably overdoing it. And the feel in this case refers to our fatigue and soreness levels. So that's basically it. Using this water bucket analogy helps to visualize volume in program design. Volume's water, we have a finite amount of it and we want to allocate it properly. And we can use that Mike Tuchscherer infographic to adjust our training load accordingly. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and you can use this theoretical framework as a more useful tool than me just giving you exact numbers that may or may not be right. Again, longer videos are harder to get good engagement on, so please like, comment, and share the video to help with that. And again, thanks for watching.